The flight wasn't carrying enough meals for all passengers. Airborne less than 30 minutes on an outbound evening flight, the lead flight attendant for the cabin crew nervously made the following painful announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so very sorry, but it appears that there has been a terrible last-minute error by our airport catering service. I don't know how this has happened, but we have 103 passengers on board and unfortunately only 40 dinner meals. I truly apologize for this mistake and inconvenience. When the passenger muttering has died down, she continued, anyone who is kind enough to give up their meal so that someone else can eat will receive free, unlimited drinks for the duration of our flight. Her next announcement came 90 minutes later. If anyone would like to change their minds, we still have 40 dinners available.
A group of passengers are riding the bus to work. Suddenly, the engine splutters and the bus grinds to a halt at the side of the road. The driver gets out, opens the engine compartment, and peers inside, cursing and swearing. After a while, the passengers get restless. A woman pulls a small toolkit out of her purse, gets up and goes outside, and sees the driver frantically trying to reattach a loose electrical cable with his fingers. "Would you like a screwdriver?" she asks. "I'd love one," he replies, "but we're 10 minutes late already." It's a nice day at the university when members of the teaching staff, a physicist, a law professor, a political science professor, a chemist, and a statistician walk into an office to discover the trash can is on fire. The political science professor says, "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything," and proceeds to exit the room. The physicist announces, "We must put the garbage can in the fridge so that the temperature will be below the ignition temperature and therefore put itself out." The chemist replies, "No, we must cover the garbage can so that the fire consumes all of the oxygen and, in the absence of reactants, can no longer continue." The law professor declares, "Please stop blaming the victim. You have yet to prove the can is indeed on fire." Meanwhile, the three turn around to find that the statistician is running around the room setting everything else on fire. "What the heck are you doing?" they scream at him. "Getting a proper sample size."
A young blonde woman goes to an office for a job interview. The interviewer decides to start with the basics. "So, miss, can you tell us your age, please?" he asks. The blonde counts carefully on her fingers for about 3 seconds before replying, 25. The interviewer tries another straightforward one to break the ice. "And can you tell us your height, please?" The young lady stands up and produces a measuring tape from her handbag. She then traps one end under her foot and extends the tape to the top of her head. She checks the measurement and announces 5'3". This isn't looking good, so the interviewer goes for the real basics. "And just to confirm for our records, your name, please." The blonde bobs her head from side to side for about 20 seconds, mouthing something silently to herself before replying, "Stephanie." The interviewer is completely baffled at this stage, so he asks, "Just out of curiosity, miss, we can understand you're counting on your fingers to work out your age, and the measuring tape for your height is obvious, but what were you doing when we asked you your name?" "Oh, that," replies the blonde, "that's just me running through 'Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you.'"
A lawyer and his Czechoslovakian friend were camping in a backwoods section of Maine. Early one morning, the two went out to pick berries for their morning breakfast. As they went around the berry patch, gathering blueberries and raspberries in tremendous quantities, along came two huge bears, a male and a female. The lawyer, seeing the two bears, immediately dashed for cover. His friend, though, wasn't so lucky, and the male bear reached him and swallowed him whole. The lawyer ran back to his Mercedes, tore into town as fast as he could, and got the local backwoods sheriff. The sheriff grabbed his shotgun and dashed back to the berry patch with the lawyer. Sure enough, the two bears were still there. "He's in that one!" cried the lawyer, pointing to the male, while visions of lawsuits from his friend's family danced in his head. He just had to save his friend. The sheriff looked at the bears and, without batting an eye, leveled his gun, took careful aim, and shot the female. "What did you do that for?" exclaimed the lawyer. "I said he was in the other." "Exactly," replied the sheriff. "Would you believe a lawyer who told you the check was in the mail?"
An arrogant rich man passed away one day. In his will, he entrusted $100,000 in cash to each of his closest advisors, his accountant, his doctor, and his lawyer. In his will, he instructed that each of them was to put all of the money into an envelope and place it into his coffin at his funeral, so he could have his money even after death. On the day of the funeral, each of his advisors came with a large envelope, and each, in turn, placed it in the wealthy man's open casket. At the end of the funeral, when the man was buried, each of the advisors walked away from the cemetery together. The accountant said to the other two, "I must confess, I didn't put all of the money in. I kept $20,000 for myself and only put in $80,000. The doctor responded, "I should be honest too. I kept $30,000 for myself and only put in $70,000. The lawyer looked at the other two with disdain and said, "I'm ashamed of both of you. Our client instructed us to put in $100,000 each into his casket, and I'll have you know I put in a check for the full amount." One day, there was this lawyer who had just bought a new car, and he was eager to show it off to his colleagues when all of a sudden, an 18-wheeler came out of nowhere and took off the driver's side door with him standing right there. "No!" he screamed, because he knew that no matter how much a mechanic tried to fix it, it never would be the same. Finally, a policeman came by, and the lawyer ran up to him yelling, "My BMW's door was just ruined by some foolish driver," he exclaimed. "You're a lawyer, aren't you?" asked the policeman. "Yes, I am, but what does this have to do with my car?" the lawyer asked. "Ha!" the policeman replied. "You lawyers are always so materialistic. All you care about are your possessions. I bet you didn't even notice that your left arm is missing, did you?" the cop said. The lawyer looked down at his side and exclaimed, "My Rolex!"
Three friends, a rabbi, a Hindu holy man, and a lawyer, had car trouble in the countryside and asked to spend the night with a farmer. The farmer said, "There might be a problem. You see, I only have room for two to sleep, so one of you must sleep in the barn." "No problem," chimed the rabbi. "My people wandered in the desert for 40 years. I am humble enough to sleep in the barn for an evening in their memory." With that, he departed to the barn, and the others bedded down for the night. Moments later, a knock was heard at the door. The farmer opened the door. There stood the rabbi from the barn. "What's wrong?" asked the farmer. He replied, "I am grateful to you, good sir, but I can't sleep in the barn. There is a pig in the barn, and my faith believes that is an unclean animal." His Hindu friend agreed to swap places with him. But a few minutes later, the same scene reoccurred. There was a knock on the door. "What's wrong now?" the farmer asked. The Hindu holy man replied, "I too am grateful for your helping us out, but there is a cow in the barn, and in my country, cows are considered sacred. I can't sleep on holy ground." Well, that left only the lawyer to make the change. He grumbled and complained, but went out to the barn. Moments later, there was another knock on the farmer's door. Frustrated and tired, the farmer opened the door, and there stood the pig and the cow. Lawyers should never ask a Southern grandma a question if they aren't prepared for the answer. In a trial, a small-town Southern prosecuting attorney called his first witness, a grandmotherly elderly woman, to the stand. He approached her and asked, "Mrs. Jones, do you know me?" She responded, "Why, yes, I do know you, Mr. Williams.
I've known you since you were a young boy, and frankly, you've been a big disappointment to me. You lie, you cheat on your wife, and you manipulate people and talk about them behind their backs. You think you're a big shot when you haven't the brains to realize you never will amount to anything more than a 2-bit peeper pusher. Yes, I know you." The lawyer was stunned. Not knowing what else to do, he pointed across the room and asked, "Mrs. Jones, do you know the defense attorney?" She again replied, "Why, yes, I do. I've known Mr. Bradley since he was a youngster, too. He's lazy and bigoted, and he has a drinking problem. He can't build a normal relationship with anyone, and his law practice is one of the worst in the entire state. Not to mention, he cheated on his wife with 3 different women. One of them was your wife. Yes, I know him." The defense attorney almost died. The judge asked both counselors to approach the bench and, in a very quiet voice, said, "If either of you idiots asked her if she knows me, I'll send you both to the electric chair." Whitey was in the fertilized egg business. He had several hundred young layers called pullets and 8 or 10 roosters whose job was to fertilize the eggs. Whitey kept records, and any rooster that didn't perform went into the soup pot and was replaced. That took an awful lot of Whitey's time, so Whitey got a set of tiny bells and attached them to his roosters. Each bell had a different tone, so Whitey could tell from a distance which rooster was performing. Now he could sit on the porch and fill out an efficiency report simply by listening to the bells. Whitey's favorite rooster was Old Brewster, a very fine specimen he was too. But on this particular morning, Whitey noticed Old Brewster's bell hadn't rung at all. Whitey went to investigate. The other roosters were chasing pullets, bells are ringing. The pullets, hearing the roosters coming, would run for cover. But, to Whitey's amazement, Brewster had his bell in his beak so it couldn't ring. He'd sneak up on a pullet, do his job, and walk on to the next one. Whitey was so proud of Brewster, he entered him in the county fair, and Brewster became an overnight sensation among the judges. The result, the judges not only awarded Brewster the Nobel Peace Prize, but they also awarded him the Pulitzer Prize as well. A judge was interviewing a woman regarding her pending divorce and asked, "What are the grounds for your divorce?" She replied, "About 4 acres and a nice little home in the middle of the property with a stream running by." "No," he said, "I mean, what is the foundation of this case?" "It is made of concrete, brick, and mortar," she responded. "I mean," he continued, "what are your relations like?" "I have an aunt and uncle living here in town, and so do my husband's parents." He said, "Do you have a real grudge?" "No," she replied. "We have a 2-car carport and have never really needed one." "Please," he tried again, "is there any infidelity in your marriage?" "Yes, both my son and daughter have stereo sets. We don't necessarily like the music, but the answer to your question is yes." "Ma'am, does your husband ever beat you up?" "Yes," she responded. "About twice a week he gets up earlier than I do." Finally, in frustration, the judge asked, "Lady, why do you want a divorce?" "Oh, I don't want a divorce," she replied. "I've never wanted a divorce. My husband does. He said he can't communicate with me." A man faces a violation for adding horse meat to the chicken stew in his restaurant. At the court, he's asked why he did it and how much horse meat was in that stew. "For the money, of course, and I solemnly swear I always kept the ratio 50-50. While the infraction caused many unhappy customers, upon seeing the man's honesty, the judge decides not to revoke his license. However, he in turn must always advertise that horse is part of the ingredients. With a sigh of relief, the restaurant owner pays the fine and walks out of the courthouse with his wife and friend. His friend asked him, "Did you really put horse meat, or did you add anything else with the chicken?" "Nope, only horse meat and chicken." "Now tell me the truth, man, come on. It was mostly horse meat, wasn't it?" "Nope, it was always 50-50. 1 horse per 1 chicken." A 15-year-old Amish boy and his father visited the city for the very first time. They wandered around, marveling at the different sights. Eventually, they got to a mall.
They were amazed by almost everything they saw, but they were especially amazed at two shiny silver walls that could move apart and then slide back together again. The boy asked, "What is this, Father?" The father, never having seen an elevator, responded, "Son, I have never seen anything like this in my life. I don't know what it is." While the boy and his father were watching with amazement, a fat old lady in a wheelchair rolled up to the moving walls and pressed a button. The walls opened, and the lady passed between them into a small room. The walls closed, and the boy and his father watched the small numbers above the walls light up sequentially. They continued to watch until it reached the last number, and then the numbers began to light in the reverse order. Finally, the walls opened up again, and a gorgeous 24-year-old blonde woman stepped out. The father, not taking his eyes off the young woman, said quietly to his son, "Junior, go get your mother."
A young girl who was writing a paper for school came to her father and asked, "Dad, what is the difference between anger and exasperation?" The father replied, "It is mostly a matter of degree. Let me show you what I mean." With that, the father went to the telephone and dialed a number at random. To the man who answered the phone, he said, "Hello, is Melvin there?" The man answered, "There is no one living here named Melvin. Why don't you learn to look up numbers before you dial?" "See," said the father to his daughter, "that man was not a bit happy with our call. He was probably very busy with something and we annoyed him. Now watch." The father dialed the number again. "Hello, is Melvin there?" asked the father. "Now look here," came the heated reply. "You just called this number and I told you that there is no Melvin here. You've got a lot of guts calling again." The receiver slammed down hard. The father turned to his daughter and said, "You see, that was anger. Now I'll show you what exasperation means." He dialed the same number, and when a violent voice roared, "Hello!" the father calmly said, "Hello, this is Melvin. Have there been any calls for me?"
My wife walked in on an argument between our son and me. When he ran out of the room crying, I turned to the wife and said, "I wish I'd used a condom now." Horrified, she said, "What? You wish our son had never been born?" "No," I replied, "I got his girlfriend pregnant." A small-town man decides to go to the city. He's a self-sufficient guy, so this is a rare occurrence. However, finding himself low on essentials, he decides there's nothing for it and heads in. Being something of a special occasion, he takes his youngest child with him, thinking it was the perfect chance to show off his knowledge of the world outside to an eager audience. On the trip in, they chatter away until they arrive at their first stop, the bakery. Pulling up, the little one excitedly asks where they are. "Why, this is John the baker, the youngest. You see, when Dad doesn't make any bread, John makes it for him." The little one stares at him wide-eyed and asks, "Is it as good as yours?" With a small grin, he replies, "No, mine is better," and off he went to get the bread. Arriving at their next stop, the little one again queries where they are. "Why, this is Ted's liquor store, youngest. You see, when Dad doesn't make any beer, Ted makes it for him." The little one stares at him, thinking hard, and asks, "Is it as good as yours?" With a bigger grin, he replies, "No, mine is better," and off he went to get some beer. At their final stop, the butcher's shop, the little one thinks the world makes a lot more sense now. So then, Dad, his smallest child, begins and looks at him expectantly. "Yes, that's right, little one, this is Tom the butcher, and when Dad hasn't made any sausages," he trails off. "Tom makes them for you?" she asks hesitantly. "Yes, that's right, you are a smart one," he exclaimed, "and yours are better," she chats. Beaming with pride, he says, "Exactly," and away he goes to collect some sausages from Tom. On the road home, they pass the postal truck coming the other way. "Hey, Dad!" exclaimed the little one, "it's Pete the postman." "Yes, that's right," said the farmer, but sensing what comes next, he quickly continued, "But we need Pete. Your dad is a farmer and can do a lot of things, but I can't do what Pete does." "Oh, yes," she replied, "Mum says so too."
Marvin was in the hospital on his deathbed. The family called Marvin's preacher to be with him in his final moments. As the preacher stood by the bed, Marvin's condition seemed to deteriorate, and Marvin motioned for someone to quickly pass him a pen and paper. The preacher quickly got a pen and paper and lovingly handed it to Marvin. But before he had a chance to read the note, Marvin died. The preacher, feeling that now wasn't the right time to read it, put the note in his jacket pocket. It was at the funeral, while speaking, that the preacher suddenly remembered the note. Reaching deep into his pocket, the preacher said, "And you know what? I suddenly remembered that right before Marvin died, he handed me a note. And knowing Marvin, I'm sure it was something inspiring that we can all gain from." With that introduction, the preacher ripped out the note and opened it. The note said, "Hey, you are standing on my oxygen tube."
An extraordinarily handsome man decided he had the God-given responsibility to marry the perfect woman so they could produce children beyond comparison. With that as his mission, he began searching for the perfect woman. After a diligent but fruitless search up and down the East Coast, he started to head west. Shortly thereafter, he met a farmer who had 3 stunning, gorgeous daughters that positively took his breath away. So he explained his mission to the farmer, asking for permission to marry one of them. The farmer simply replied, "They're all looking to get married, so you came to the right place. Look them over and select the one you want." The man dated the first daughter. The next day, the farmer asked for the man's opinion. "Well," said the man, "she's just a wee bit, not that you can hardly notice, but pigeon-toed." The farmer nodded and suggested the man date one of the other girls. So the man went out with the second daughter. The next day, the farmer again asked how things went. "Well," the man replied, "she's just a wee bit, not that you can hardly tell, cross-eyed." The farmer nodded and suggested he date the third girl to see if things might be better. So he did. The next morning, the man rushed in, exclaiming, "She's perfect, just perfect. She's the one I want to marry." So they were wed right away. Months later, the baby was born. When the man visited the nursery, he was horrified. The baby, while cute, had the ugliest face he had ever seen. He rushed to his father-in-law, asking how such a thing could happen considering the parents. "Well," explained the farmer, "she was just a wee bit pregnant, not that you could hardly tell, when you met her." An old man lived alone in the country. It was spring, and he wanted to dig his tomato garden, as he had done every year. But it was very hard work for the aging man, as the ground was hard. His only son, Vincent, who used to help him, was currently in prison. The old man wrote a letter to his son and described his predicament. "Dear Vincent, I'm feeling pretty bad because it looks like I won't be able to plant my tomato garden this year. I'm just getting too old to be digging up a garden plot. If only you were here, my troubles would be over. I know you would dig the plot for me. Love, Dad." A few days later, he received a letter from his son. "Dear Dad, not for nothing, but don't dig up that garden. That's where I buried my weapons. Love, Vinny." At 4 a.m. the next morning, FBI agents and local police arrived at the old man's house and dug up the entire area. However, they didn't find any weapons, so they apologized to the old man and left. That same day, the old man received another letter from his son. "Dear Dad, go ahead and plant the tomatoes now. That's the best I could do under the circumstances. Love, Vinny."
A 15-year-old came home with a Porsche, and his parents began to yell and scream, "Where did you get that car?" He calmly told them, "I bought it today." "With what money?" demanded his parents. "We know what a Porsche costs." "Well," said the boy, "this one cost me $15. The parents began to yell even louder. "Who would sell a car like that for $15? They asked. "It was the lady up the street," said the boy. "Don't know her name, they just moved in. She saw me ride past on my bike and asked me if I wanted to buy a Porsche for $15.
"Oh my goodness," moaned the mother. "She must be a child abuser. Who knows what she will do next? John, you go right up there and see what's going on." So the boy's father walked up the street to the house where the lady lived and found her out in the yard, calmly planting flowers. He introduced himself as the father of the boy to whom she had sold a Porsche to for $15 and demanded to know why she did it. "Well," she said, "this morning I got a phone call from my husband. I thought he was on a business trip, but I learned from a friend he has run off to Hawaii with his secretary. Then, apparently, she stole all his money and stranded him there. Well, he called me without a dollar to his name and asked me to sell his new Porsche and send him the money. So that's exactly what I did."
A Bible study group was discussing the unforeseen possibility of their sudden death. The leader of the discussion said, "We will all die someday, and none of us really know when. But if we did, we would all do a better job of preparing ourselves for that inevitable event." Everyone shook their heads in agreement with this comment. Then the leader said to the group, "What would you do if you knew you only had 4 weeks of life remaining before your death, and then the great judgment day?" A gentleman said, "I would go out into my community and minister the gospel to those that have not yet accepted the Lord into their lives." "Very good," said the group leader, and all the group members agreed that would be a very good thing to do. One lady spoke up and said enthusiastically, "I would dedicate all of my remaining time to serving God, my family, my church, and my fellow man with a greater conviction." "That's wonderful," the group leader commented, and all the group members agreed that would be a very good thing to do. But one gentleman in the back finally spoke up loudly and said, "I would go to my mother-in-law's house for the 4 weeks." Everyone was puzzled by this answer, and the group leader asks, "Why your mother-in-law's home?" "Because that will make it the longest 4 weeks of my life."
A 19-year-old Italian girl tells her mom that she has missed her period for 2 months. Very worried, the mother goes to the drugstore and buys a pregnancy kit. The test result shows that the girl is pregnant. Shouting, cursing, and crying, the mother says, "Who was the pig that did this to you? I want to know." The girl cries and says she only dated the father for a few weeks. She picks up the phone and makes a call. Half an hour later, a Ferrari stops in front of their house. A mature and distinguished man with gray hair and impeccably dressed in an Armani suit steps out of the Ferrari and enters the house. He sits in the living room with the father, mother, and the girl and tells them, "Good morning. Your daughter has informed me of the problem. I can't marry her because of my personal family situation, but I'll take charge. I will pay all costs and provide for your daughter for the rest of her life. Additionally, if a girl is born, I will bequeath a Ferrari, a beach house, 2 retail stores, a townhouse, a beachfront villa, and a $2 million bank account. If a boy is born, my legacy will be a couple of factories and a $4 million bank account. If twins, they will receive a factory and $2 million each. However, if the worst should happen and there is a miscarriage, what do you suggest we do?" At this point, the father, who had remained silent, places a hand firmly on the man's shoulder and tells him, "You try again."
One Sunday morning, Michael burst into the living room and said, "Dad, Mom, I have some great news for you. I am getting married to the most beautiful girl in town. She lives a block away, and her name is Susan." After dinner, Michael's dad took him aside. "Son, I have to talk to you. Look at your mother, Michael. She and I have been married 30 years. She's a wonderful wife and mother, but she has never offered much excitement in the bedroom, so I used to fool around with women a lot. I'm afraid Susan is the result of one such affair. She's actually your half-sister, and I'm afraid you can't marry her." Michael was brokenhearted. He broke up with Susan the next day. After 8 months, he eventually started dating girls again. A year later, he came home and very proudly announced, "Diane said yes, we're getting married in June." Again, his father insisted on another private conversation and broke the sad news. "Diane is your half-sister too, Michael. I'm awfully sorry about this." Michael was livid. He broke up with Diane that same day, leaving her in tears. He finally decided to go to his mother with the news his father had shared and told her about his father's secret. "Dad has done so much harm. I guess I'm never going to get married," he complained. "Every time I fall in love, Dad tells me the girl is my half-sister." "Oh," his mother shook her head, "what are you listening to him for? He's not even your real father."